get started. It's 101, and I assume people will keep trickling in. So I am Jennifer Cox, and I'll be doing most of the presentation, but I also have Brianne Stewart's name on here, and Brianne will be helping by putting some things in the comments as well as we go through the presentation, and may answer some questions at the end. So today we're going to talk about the 4 ACT agreements and how you can use them. So you're here because you've heard of them in some capacity. Maybe you've signed on to them, maybe you're using them, but you want to learn more and get some clarification. So this seminar was an idea brought out by one of our sub-working groups at for the contracts working group to kind of level set with everyone, go over what did we make, how does it work, how do I implement them? So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so oops, here we go. There we go. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to talk about who made and funded the ACT contracts. What are the 4 different contracts? What does each one say and how does it work? We're going to talk a little bit about how to implement them at your institutions, as well as how to know who has and has not signed on. And then we're going to leave a lot of time at the end for questions. I do unfortunately have a hard stop at 1 p.m., but if people want to stay, or sorry, at 2 p.m., Eastern Standard Time, so about 1 hour from now. If I don't know if Sierra or Brianne can stay on a little bit after that, but I will unfortunately have to leave at that time. All right, so let's jump in. Okay, so what and who is ACT and what is the ACT Contracts Working Group? So ACT is a CIHR funded initiative that was intended to streamline clinical trials in Canada to kind of give us a better kickstart and be more competitive against other countries in the world. And it was the whole grant application was led by Dr. PJ Devereaux out of PHI McMaster. And one small part of the grant was to create a contracts working group. Brianne and I were the co-chairs of that working group. And although the initial ACT grant only had 11 clinical trial units in it, representing 11 institutions, we thought that approach was not going to get us the contract that we wanted. And so we cast a really wide net across Canada and eventually brought in over 50 institutions to be part of the working group. And we did this because we didn't think these 11 institutions could create something that everyone else would just sign on to. That's not typically how contract negotiations work. So we wanted a lot of buy-in as early as possible. And we had representation from the East Coast to the West Coast, not the North, unfortunately, no representation from the North, but the whole breadth of Canada and the various legal realities in the different, in that different entities across Canada face, whether they are health authorities or universities or hospitals or research institutes or whatever they are. All right, so we made, as a working group, we made 4 agreements. We created and distributed 4 agreements. So the first is the Governing Data and Sample Sharing Agreement, which we call the GDSSA. It's been fully operable, I believe for 2 years. I think it's February 1st, 2024, if I'm not incorrect. So that one's been the longest in action. The next one was the Governing Participating Site Agreement for Regulated Studies. Now that one came in, I believe, last July. The next one is the Governing Participating Site Agreement for Non-Regulated Studies, which came in November. And the last one is a Template Participating Site Agreement, which came in, I think it was July 2024. Maybe after that, maybe that date might not be right. Anyway, so this looks like a lot of things, but really what it is a data sharing agreement, number 1, and participating site agreement 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4 are all variations on a theme. Their language is almost identical with some variations to kind of put you in the right box and to fit you in the right situation. And we're going to talk a lot more about how they differ and where they differ later, but they're all very similar tools. And I also talked about called the first 3 governing agreements and the last one a template. So what is the difference between them? So a template is an agreed upon starting point. You're still working in a draft copy whenever you distribute it. And it's an exercise in pre-negotiating terms and kind of putting different prompts in place to help you come up with the right agreement. But there's nothing that requires you to use the template or that forces you to communicate changes to the template to the other side. There are incentives to use it, but it's still, as anyone who's created a template with a pharma company who knows, you can never guarantee they're actually going to use that one coming forward. Whereas a governing or master agreement is an agreement everyone signs off on. You say these are the terms that we're going to use, and to implement this, we're going to execute a subsequent agreement, a shorter agreement. And so the format's a little bit different. You can have the exact same content, but the actual utilization of it is different. And so anytime you want to change what's in the governing agreement, you have to actually point it out to the other side and explicitly say, you know, clause 6 is changed as follows. All right, and usually those subsequent agreements under a governing, or also called a master agreement, will be a statement of work, a study letter, a transfer letter, sometimes we just call them study agreements, something like that. Okay, and again, just to summarize quickly before we get into them, there are 3 governing agreements, 1 template. But all of them are for academic research exclusively, and all of them are agnostic to all areas of medical research. So it doesn't matter if it's about critical care, about cancer, hematology, mental health, anything. This works for all of them. All of these drafts work for all of the areas. All right, so, and for all 3 of the governing agreements, we're going to talk about the same pattern over and over. I'm going to say this about 6 times in this meeting. For anyone who's not clear about how this works, that will hopefully provide that clarity, just high level. So first, there's a governing agreement, a PDF document that everyone signs that has 90% of the terms. Then more people can join to sign on as if they had been an original party to that governing agreement by signing a joinder letter. And last but not least, then parties they apply the governing agreement to a study by executing either a transfer letter or a study letter. So it follows that same pattern. Main agreement, other parties can sign on by a joinder agreement, and people actually execute it for a study with a transfer letter or study letter. All right, so let's get into it. So the first of the contracts I want to talk about is the governing data and sample sharing agreement. This is what it looks like. If you've ever seen it, this is the front page of it. As you can see, it's exclusively for data and biological materials. That's it. That's all it covers. And as you can see here, it's a governing agreement with a list of parties right at the start. And that's going to be something I point out as we go through these different agreements of how the parties are incorporated. But this one lists them right at the beginning, first page. And then there's like 10 more pages of terms, but we're not going to spend too much time on those terms right now. So when another party wants to join, you weren't one of the initial signatories in February 2024, they execute a letter joinder agreement. And what the joinder agreement creates is the effect of it is that the terms from the GDSSA apply equally to any new parties who join as to the original parties. And any academic institution can join, and any academic institution can invite another academic institution to join. We're very open, as long as it's, I got called out for this recently, not just academic or not just academic institution, it could be a community hospital, could be anyone who's not a for-profit company. And when parties sign onto the joinder agreement, they can't make any changes to the GDSSA. They take it as it is. So you can't say, well, I like it all, but I can't agree to clause 8 governing law. I don't like that governing law. I need a different governing law. When you sign on, there's nothing you can do at that time. You can make changes in the transfer letter, which we'll get to in a second, but you just sign on to it as is. So let's talk about the transfer letter. So you sign on to the GDSSA, and now you want to move samples for a study. You would fill out a transfer letter. And I always describe the transfer letters and the study letters as Play-Doh or putty, because this is where you get to shape it to fit your situation. This is a model. This is the transfer letter is a template, and you get to move it and manipulate it as you need for the purposes of your study. And there's a couple really important things to point out. First of all, there's a prompt here at the bottom about financial terms. You can add them or delete them. Again, this is your agreement. You get to shape it how you want to shape it. And then this is what the next page looks like. I've just taken screenshots of what the draft looks like. And this section is where you state, like A and B is where you state what's happening with the data and samples. Where's it going from where to where? And that's your place to really put in details about the actual, like what's happening in the study, the actual facts of the sample and data transfers. And then here at the bottom, in that modifications to governing agreement, this is your place to override the terms of the override the terms of the GDSSA, where you say Section 8 governing law, strike it. We want this new governing law. All of that is perfectly acceptable. But again, you should be clear, and you should make sure the other side understands why you're doing it. Because the point here is to have a focused negotiation, not no negotiation. We're not trying to force anyone to say, these are the only terms you can abide by. We are trying to say, here's an agreed upon norm. Speak to when you deviate from that norm and say why. And really, throughout all of these, every single one of the agreements we'll talk about, it's meant to be a conversation between institutions who want to collaborate together. It's not meant to be a gotcha or a tricked you into this. It's meant to be, here's where we're coming from. Here's where we're deviating from that norm. Again, here's why. Here's why we want to do things quickly and well. All right, so this is the last page you'll see of the governing agreement. And one thing I want to point out here is there are no terms about the performance of the study. There's nothing about patient consent. There's nothing about patient interaction. The GDSSA is not built for performing a clinical trial or performing anything with patient interaction. That's just not the terms included in it. I have seen people use it for, let's say, where there's questionnaires for patients. It does not have the adequate terms I would require for that, but you could add them here, you know, in the other details. And we've added like a whole page of things before. So you could leverage it like that. Again, it's your putty, it's your Play-Doh. You have control over how you use it. There's no one monitoring it. It's really, this is a standalone contract between, you know, whatever competent parties enter into it. But just to say, those terms are not a natural part of it. Okay, and the last thing I'll say is when you are considering if there are terms you want to change, one thing I recommend doing is checking out in the full agreement, the GDSSA, looking at the intellectual property terms and the publication terms. And that's just because how they speak to a receiving party, disclosing party. So you want to make sure that the right parties are identified as having the right rights. And that's a really simple fix. So you might say, if you look at clause 10 for your situation, you say, ooh, no, actually, I don't like how that's stated. And you could state, you know, in your modification, say, for the purposes of clause 10 and 13, receiving party shall mean Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, for instance. So you can deal with that quite quickly. But it's worth confirming just to double check that you are, that this is still adequate for your situation. All right, and then this is the website. So if you go to everything except the GDSSA part, you can see a contracts tab right at the front. Brianne, do you think you could drop that into the chat? Just the link, so people could click on it. And there's a whole page on the GDSSA, which is great. And so almost all the information we talked about just now is up there, or quite a lot of it is up there. And you can always download the original agreement, the joinder letter, and the transfer letter right from there. All right, so back to this pattern again. It's a governing agreement that the GDSSA is a governing agreement that original parties sign on to, and that more parties can sign on to by signing a joinder letter, and that parties can actually transfer data and samples by executing a transfer letter under it. The same pattern over and over. And again, it's just a summary about how it works. It's intended for the transfer of data and samples between academic institutions. It's not meant to perform a study or trial with participant interaction, but again, it's your putty. You do what you want. You actually can transfer the data and samples by executing a transfer letter, and I just said this one, but you get to manipulate it as it works for you. All right, let's go to the next one. So the next agreement, and we'll probably spend the most time on this one more than all the others, this is the Governing Participating Site Agreement Regulated. This was kind of the big fish out of the four to really get off the ground. It was probably one of the trickiest too to negotiate and finalize. So you'll notice right off the bat, it is in the title that it's for interventional and regulated trials. And it's a participating site agreement. So what does that tell us? That tells us it's intended for when one academic site is asking another academic site to participate in a Health Canada regulated trial, an academic trial. And I put that asterisk there because I always like to remind people, phase 4 trials are still Health Canada regulated. They don't require a Health Canada application, but they are still regulated and they are still subject to a number of obligations. And this agreement is built for those obligations, regardless if it's phase 1 or phase 4. All right, another important thing here is, this is in the title as well, but it's also in the recitals. It's for funding for tri-council agencies within Canada. And this agreement is built for and is consistent with CIHR requirements. And you'll also notice here, there are no parties listed at all. There, unlike the other agreement where the parties are right at the top, there's no parties listed here. Instead, we have moved the parties to a Schedule A. And we did this for a couple of reasons. But the main reason was confidentiality, because as we were sharing the GDSSA, we realized, oh, wow, immediately there's the maybe quasi-confidential information or information where we're not sure if it's confidential right in the first few pages. And that became a trickier thing to manage about how we distribute that agreement. And we worked it out, but we decided for this agreement, we were going to keep that list of signatories separate so that we could share the agreement more widely without it containing anyone's potentially confidential information. So that's why you don't see parties at the top. You'll see them as a Schedule A if you sign on. All right, so again, almost the exact same joinder letter, exact same points. You can sign on anytime. It's as if you're original signatory. Academic institutions can do it, and you don't get to change the original agreement when you sign on. And then we get to the study letter, where all the magic happens. So just like the transfer letter, this is your Play-Doh. You get to shape it and move it in a way that works for your study. And you'll notice here a little bit different from the transfer letter for the GDSSA. There's a lot of blue prompts. And the blue prompts say NTD, which means note to draft. Or note to drafter. And this is to help the drafter think about the things they need to be thinking about in drafting this. And you'll see them a lot, like if the PI is not a party, then add if this. And a lot of those will get deleted when you actually send them to the other side, or most of them will be deleted to send them to the other side, but they are meant to make you think of the things that you need to think of as a drafter. And you'll also notice right here, so the Governing Participating Site Agreement Regulated is for Tri-Council, but we've left an option here where you can incorporate another funder. So maybe it's CIHR and another funder, or maybe just another funder with terms materially similar to CIHR's. You could leverage this. It's not built for a different funder, it's built for CIHR. But again, this is your Play-Doh. If it makes sense to use this, then you have that option possible for you. All right. So then you'll see here more prompts to make you think about what are the really meaningful parts of a regulated participating site agreement. And so we spell out the phase, we spell out the sponsor, we talk about where samples are not going. Another reminder, phase 4 are Health Canada regulated. We spelled out some of the really stickier points about study product warranty, and we want people to think about them and to anticipate the other side's going to ask about them, because they do. They always do. This always comes up. And we also, if you don't have a study product warranty, it's suggested, please specify if they're in warranty and if there aren't any warranties, if there are warranties, or if there aren't any warranties, and if you're going to enforce it. So again, we're trying to get the right people thinking about the right things and communicating it to the other side to reduce the numbers of back and forths. All right, and then this is probably the most, the place where the most negotiation happens, I think, in this particular study letter, which is about liability. Because when you have an academic regulated trial, anything could go. So you could have mutual indemnities, all the sides are good with it. You could have a one-way indemnity. You could have just mutual standard liability, etc. And we knew going in that this is going to be where institutions across Canada deviate the most. And again, it's meant to be a focused negotiation, not no negotiation. So we wanted to give prompts and possibilities, but again, really let people focus on what matters, figuring out liability or indemnity language that works, not focusing on the rest of whatever else is, when you read a whole agreement top to bottom, that's a whole agreement top to bottom. You are redlining, versus this is a much smaller package. Okay, and again, just like in the transfer letter, there is the option to modify the governing agreement. And again, in the note to draft, we've listed a whole bunch of things. These are just things to prompt you to consider. You don't have to change any of them, but they're there. And you'll also see at the bottom, we say, see drafter's note. There is at the end of this draft, a drafter's note to say, here are some other clauses you could put in or out. Purely to help the drafter, they are not, they can get completely deleted if not relevant. And again, meant to be a conversation, not meant to be trick anyone or force anyone into exact terms. And then this is the pre-included list of Tri-Council compliant funding terms at the end of the agreement. Like everything else, this can be adapted. So if you wanted to keep the first paragraph, but not the next 2, 3, 4, because you're doing invoicing, not pre-sending money, you can do it. This is your contract. Like I said, no one is watching over and seeing if you're doing it right. You get to shape it as you want. And there is the website for that one. All right, and the pattern, same deal. There's a governing agreement. There is a joinder letter parties can sign on to, and then you use it by executing a study letter. All right, and then a summary of the GPSA regulated. It's intended for one academic institution to perform a regulated trial that's led by another academic institution. Maybe I shouldn't say one there. It could be, if there's 3 entities at your institution, you can sign all 3 on. It's not a problem. It's intended for trials funded by CIHR and built for that purpose, but you could adapt it with some work to work for other funders with materially similar terms. And it is not meant for industry-sponsored or funded trials. And like I said before, you actually utilize it by executing a study letter. You can see that. All right, so this one is the governing participating site agreement non-regulated. It is the sister of the regulated, or the participating site agreement regulated. Quite a mouthful. They are almost identical. The only difference is that this one doesn't have terms related to the regulation of the Health Canada regulation of a trial. That's really it. Otherwise, they are identical. And in the study letter, we're in the study letter here, which is where the blue is. You'll notice the liability section, the prompt is shorter, but again, there's nothing that prevents you from putting in a subject injury provision. It's just less of an industry standard if it's not regulated, but there's nothing that prevents you from requesting one or adding one in. All right, and there's the website there. All right, I'm not going to go this pattern again. Governing agreement, joinder letter, study letter, over and over again, same pattern. And then the non-regulated summary, it's just like the regulated agreement, except it's for a non-regulated trial. It's intended for trials CIHR. It's not meant for industry anything, and you'd use it by doing a study letter. Study letters are your Play-Doh. Okay, so that's the end of the governing agreements. And now we're going to talk about the template. The template is a little bit different. It is materially similar to the other participating site agreements. Many of the clauses are identical. Some are different, but overwhelmingly it is quite the same. Now, a couple things you'll notice here is, again, for the parties. The parties are nothing but a prompt here, so no one has signed on to this. It's not a governing agreement anyone signs on to. It is a Word version you download. If you go to the website, which we'll show you in a second, you'll see it's like a short paragraph and it's like download the Word copy here, because that's it. That's all you need to know about it. And then you work through it. And if you, like I know in my office, people often just work through the blue. And so they go find the next blue, and fill out the information as needed. It is a completely blank slate. You are anticipated to communicate about what you changed to. So communicate to the other side what you've changed in it, though. So this is an introductory page on the first page of the Word version, of the Word draft. And in that second paragraph, it says, please talk to the other side. Please tell them what you've changed and how and why. Because again, this is a conversation where we're trying to speed up contract negotiations in a material way. There's the website in case you don't have it. And so why do we have the template and the governing agreement? Why do we have 3 versions of the same thing essentially? And the reason is because the template agreement has a lot more flexible prompts, especially under IP, publication, and funder requirements. It's a much easier agreement to manipulate. And this is really helpful in particular where you have a funder or a partner who has really stringent and particular provisions around mostly it's those 3 parts of the contract: IP, publication, and funding terms. But and some partners we commonly work with who have those terms are pharma companies. If a pharma company is funding your study and they're providing a drug in kind or whatever it is, they usually have some stringent requirements that don't fit with the governing participating site agreements. Similarly, if you ever work with the Ontario Institute of Cancer Research, they also have really particular requirements, and this is probably a better fit of an agreement than the governing participating site agreements. Whereas the governing participating site agreements, the GPSAs, can be really fast if your granting terms are static. If they're like CHR, it's like the same expectations almost everyone in Canada has going into, what their default expectations are around funder requirements. And so this can be a really good tool where you meet these more simple requirements, and not a great tool where it's a more complicated situation. Which gets me to this. All of these are tools in your toolbox. Pull out the one that works for you in that instance or not. And they're also not the only tools in your toolbox. There's some other tools in there. Use the one that works, essentially. These are things for you to reach for that are people who have signed on to them are bought in with the same ideas that you have. And so you should have a willing partner on the other side is the idea. All right, so now let's shift gears. That was a whole information dump of those 4 agreements. So let's shift gears about, you signed on to the agreement. What now? What happens now? How do you actually implement them? So your signatory has signed the dotted line and you just have it. And what do you do with it now? So we're going to go over a couple high-level steps of how you can implement it internally at your institution. However, I just want to note that we are working with a sub-working group from the contracts group on some materials to help people implement them. So there are written materials on this coming. Myself and Brianne and some other people from ACT are also available if you want some kind of personal support. If you want us to meet with one of your institutions, let us know. We can help with that. But this is just a really high-level introduction for that. So step number 1, you want to make sure both the people doing the work and the people in senior management are aware that these tools exist. Pretty basic, that they're not just, because what sometimes happens is somebody gets really excited, they get their signatory to sign on, and then no one tells the contracts team. And the contracts team then learns when someone else sends it to them that they actually are signatory to this agreement. So you want to avoid that. You want to make sure that the right people know that this exists and how it can be used. And step number 2, you want to make sure those people who are actually using it know when and how to use the agreement. And I just went through a really high level about how you can use it, but how you use it might be different. And this will probably come from some form of direction and clarification from either senior management or maybe just your internal management within your contracts team. And different examples of that direction might be, do you use it for all data transfers in Canada, or only certain cases? Getting that clarification. Is it just your new replacement for your standard data and samples transfer agreement? That's the kind of clarification you want. Or are you using it for only CIHR trials? Or are you going to expand it? I've seen entities do both, where they say only we're CIHR only, nothing else. We're just keeping it here. Are you replacing your current template for participating site agreement with the template agreement? Are you not using the template agreement? So those are the kinds of things where you probably want some internal direction. Or is it just use it when you want, how you want? Okay, and step number 3. So after you know when you should use it, you should know if there's things you should change in it, like governing law, for instance. Like here, maybe your direction is change your governing law to Alberta. Anytime you get a transfer letter or a study letter, change that governing law to Alberta. Make sure it says Alberta every single time, and that's your direction for a deviation. Maybe it's limit COVID insurance claims to $1 million, or it's adapt the IP terms to our standard IP terms, because IP is really important to us. Whatever it is, those directions can come, and they should be told to the people who are negotiating these agreements. But you don't also, I want to be clear, you don't have to have any deviations at all. You could just say, nope, we're good as is, no problem, move on. This is just in case there are deviations, you want to communicate them. And step number 4, you want to identify the bumps in implementation. And this is one of the areas where myself and Brianne, the people at ACT, can help you, figure things out. So bumps in implementation could be that there's multiple departments. So maybe one department's using it, but the other department doesn't want to, or is confused, or something else. So there's a discrepancy within how much it's being used. Maybe your contracts officer is just really confused and they don't know how to use it and they just need some more help. Maybe they have an agreement template you already use, and so that maybe, and you just don't want to move away from it. And maybe it's because you don't know who is signed on to these agreements, which I'm going to talk about more in a second, and you just need more clarification on that, and that's the bump. So if you're trying to implement these kind of more widely, these are some of the things you'd want to, these are kind of the 4 steps you'd want to identify and help address. And like I said, we can help you address it. So let's talk about that last thing, about who is and is not a party. So this has been something that we have been trying to work through since we started the GDSSA, and try to figure out something that works well, is up to date, and respects the confidentiality of the various signatories. And currently what we have, I think, is functional. And that's all parties are listed on the websites for these pages of the current agreements. It's public, you can go on, you can see it. Excellent, no problem. That wasn't always the case, so I appreciate everyone who's been patient as we figure this out, but they should all be up to date. And if you look and your institution is not listed, please let us know and we can resolve that. And the other question we get is, you're working, you don't want to check the website, you just want to just send it out. You don't want to do any extra steps. What we often do in our office is we just send them the whole package. So we say, hey, this is we're sending you the transfer letter from the GDSSA for the data transfer. If you're not a party yet, here is the governing agreement, and here's a joinder letter to join. So you could always just make that part of your process if you just wanted to smooth it and make it a little bit one less step to go. All right, so great. So 1:35, so we'll have 25 minutes for questions, which is about what I was aiming for. And so I have a whole list of potential questions. I always end my presentations with a list of potential questions to inspire if anyone has anything. But you don't have to ask them. We'll just answer some if there's time. But I'll open it up for questions now. Right, I'm just gonna look on the chat. Okay, so it looks like, is there a list of institutions who agreed to use all 3. And we don't have a list that says these are everyone who signed on to all 3. We just have a list of the governing agreement, and we have a list for each one, not for who is signed on to all 3 together. And do I have it in the questions? Yes, so I did have in the questions, but is there a French language translation? Yes, for some, and we're working on it for others. So, so stay tuned for those. Brianne or Sierra, can you confirm which ones have been translated already? I don't recall off the top of my head.
I'm just pulling them up right now. I believe they all are actually as of a couple weeks ago. So they'll have to be uploaded to the website. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So all done, not all uploaded yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. Good question. Okay. How is this used for PHI? So is the question in the chat. So it is agnostic as to whether the data is directly PHI, is de-identified, etc. The language has PHI appropriate terms in it as required across the different provinces, but what you're allowed to transfer is whatever is permitted under the protocol. So that's how the data is defined, as whatever permitted by the protocol. So if your protocol permits you to transfer PHI, then you're covered. How often are the online lists of parties who have signed on updated? We've been updating them as they come in. So again, this has been a little bit of a learning curve, and I think we are getting better at it. But if you send the joinder letter to me, or as described in the joinder letters, it does get to Sierra eventually, and Sierra is the one who, I believe Sierra is the one who uploads the names online as they come in.
Now, Jen, just one clarifying piece is on the governing data and sample sharing agreements. We didn't have the same language in that first agreement around public notice of a party being a signatory. So not all of the signatories on the data and sample sharing agreement appear on there if they have not given us or have not given us consent to post publicly. So we do circulate a list. We aim to do it on a monthly basis to a distribution list. So there are a few parties who have not given us permission to post it publicly, but we changed the language in the governing participating site agreements to avoid this.
Yeah.
So that is one caveat there.
Yep. So see Julie's question about, has it been modified for use in platform trials? So platform trials are really interesting and present a very interesting question. What contract is appropriate depends on the details of the study and who's funding the study. So I've seen platform trials where they are doing one trial that's unregulated or one study that's unregulated, and then another trial that's academic, led by someone out of Australia, and then another regulated trial that's led out of somebody in Alberta, and then another regulated trial that's sponsor initiated, all on the same kind of platform. Now, almost none of those would follow the same legal terms. You'd want different things to represent that relationship and protect that relationship. So the short answer is it's not. Platform trials don't fit nicely within the requirements of how the contract terms flow, is the very short answer. They just don't match up in the same way that it does in for the actual organization of a trial. Okay, so going to the next questions. Is ACT collecting any data about time to full execution? We have made a number of attempts to do so, and our attempts have come up with short data. We would like to, certainly, do that, but that's not something we've been able to get good data on yet, although we have some data on it. It's just not as robust as we would hope it'd be. But the data we do have shows that it reduced the time by about half. Okay, site agreements. Has anyone been a lead institution on a study that has enrolled both sites that are and are not signatories? How did you go about stick handling? Did you send this template to all sites? So Eric, I'll tell you what we've done here, which is that we just send out the site agreement for, like I've just did this for a regulated trial. So I sent out the study letter for a regulated trial, and I invited them to join. I said, this is what we want you to use. If you're good with it, just sign the joiner letter. And so far we haven't had anyone say no. They've just signed it and they're excited to have a master agreement for it. I'm sure that will not always be the case, but we can pivot if they need to. Which institution will take the lead in the event of a legal dispute? Bram, maybe clarify your question a little bit. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure how to answer that per se. Maybe reword it and we'll come back to it.
Well, it's
yeah,
rather simple. If there's a legal dispute, which institution will take the lead?
But what do you mean, like take the lead against
So,
whom?
so
Against
you have
each
a
other?
participating institution that signs on, and
Yeah.
you get bounded by this letter, the joiner letter. Who will? And then there's a dispute between two parties, because we're focusing here on non-sponsored studies. So,
Correct.
say two collaborative institutions. Where's the? It's simple. Who will take the lead? The guy that signs the joiner letter, or this person with the master agreement?
So if there is a dispute over the master agreement, whoever will take the lead is who's bringing the claim, right? So somebody has a dispute of some kind, and so they would bring the claim against whomever. I think that's why I'm a little bit confused by the question. And if your dispute is over, like, if your disputes over the master agreement, you can always sue over the master agreement in some capacity. But no one actually performs obligations under the master agreement except to provide notice for termination that they're leaving it. That's really it. That's really the only thing you do under the master agreement. Everything else is under a study letter or transfer letter. So if you're suing each other over dispute, it's probably under that agreement. Each of those agreements are a standalone contract. They're only between the parties who execute them. No one has oversight. No one is collecting them or holding them in one central location. It's just a tool for you to execute. So, yeah,
Okay.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, I get it. But I mean, where is the time being saved? Because the master agreement is kind of eliminating and trying to home in on components that would be deemed critical to move fast, because everything else has to be covered within that letter, right? Everything of importance. I mean, liability, and you use the term warranty. I didn't quite understand what you mean by warranty. That was a separate question.
Okay.
So my question is, where's the time to be saved?
Okay.
Is it to narrow the focus from the participating potential institution by saying, listen, home in on this letter, and then we got the rest covered?
I'll actually show you a full transfer letter, and maybe that will help. Start the transfer letter because I think that's the easiest example of it.
And Jen, while you're pulling that up, part of the conversation we had that informed this work was a good understanding of what happens at the different institutions in terms of delays. Where do they see those delays? One common theme that came up was the review process. And some institutions have a different review process when there's a master agreement in place in comparison to when there's not. So they go to different individuals, which shortens the queue in some instances. So that's another thing that we wanted to mention here. But Jen, please go ahead with the transfer letter.
Yeah. So for instance, when we send out a regular data sharing agreement, it's a 9-page agreement. It has 9 pages of terms. And here in our transfer letter, it's 4 pages total. And much of that is just prompts. So you're sitting out the terms up here. You have the scope, you plug in your study details. You plug in or remove your financial details. You say how the data is being moved. you might modify, but often you don't. Like that's a reality, is we actually don't see that many modifications, or we see minor modifications. Like I said, for, IPs, receiving party shall be blank. And then the rest of this is pretty rote. We have term, binding on investigators, termination, amendments, counterparts, a lot of boilerplate, and that's it. So when I'll say from like my team, when they fill this out, it takes a very, very short period of time to fill out. So the actual paperwork itself is very quick. And requires a little bit less than if they're filling out, well, actually quite a bit less than if they're filling out a 9-page agreement. Similarly, when the other side receives it, like Brianne said, processes are one thing. So if it's a master agreement, it might go to some institutions that has a different stream of how it gets reviewed, because it has a less intense review. Reviewing this with like, quick information here, then usually these are like a check mark here. And then this is all blank, this is all blank. That takes 10 minutes, right? I mean, if you have anyone who's remotely competent at reviewing a data sharing agreement, 10 minutes and they're done. I think the fastest one I've ever seen completed was 24 hours. And because if we just plugged it in and the other side just signed it, because it's like, great, no problem at all. As opposed to reviewing a 9-page agreement. And because if you're a lawyer and you need to do your due diligence, you have to read the whole thing, or maybe you find a different version and you compare it, and then you find an issue in clause 9 because, oh no, you actually like this way to describe it this way around liability, not that way around liability. So you save a lot of time in just kind of the start to finish of it all, especially, like I said, I think this one shows it really well. And the data and sample sharing agreements are really are really low risk just in general compared to especially a regulated trial. But yeah, so that's where the time saved comes from.
Great, thank you.
Right. So I'm going to put this back up again. All right. Any other questions? I like Kathy's comment that they're making platform trial work. Yeah, I love it. All right. Any other questions?
So can you comment on the regulated components, the item 3.4? What's the warranties you're referring to?
Okay, I'll pull that up. I'll show you the actual agreement. Is this the right one? I think this is the right one. Yeah, okay. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so the warranties. So where this is a regulated trial, there will be either a product or either a device or a drug involved by definition. So when you have that, you have all this information about study product. So we're saying what it is, where did it come from, who's paying for it, how is it stored, etc. And then from there, you jump straight into study product warranty. So study product warranty can be a really contentious point in an academic agreement for a number of reasons. One is that they're quite hard to get, or can be quite hard to get, but there's a lot of pressure from your participating sites to get it. So this is like a reminder on behalf of participating sites for the lead site to try to get that. That's going to be their expectation. Okay. However, there's also times where you will never get a warranty. If you were doing a phase 4 trial and you're buying the product off the shelf, there's no warranty that exists. No one has a warranty. And so just prompting that for a clarification, saying no warranty, we're just purchasing this as per normal. The pharma company has no idea we're even doing this trial. So that's what it's meant for you to think about and engage with.
Great, thank you.
No problem. All right, other questions? I'm just gonna see if there's anything I want to talk about in here before, or otherwise we'll let you guys go a little bit earlier. Will the presentation be made available? Yes, we can definitely get the slides out. Sierra, remind me, was this recorded?
Yes, this is being recorded.
Excellent. Okay, are we able to share the recording?
Yep, that shouldn't be a problem.
Stephanie's question about AI related provisions. No, there are not. What there are, and again, it depends if how you want to use the AI, but any uses of AI within this, that are within the protocol are covered with, because everything is derived from the protocol. All uses, all the other side's ability to use it, all is contained in what's in the protocol. So to the extent AI is in there, that's covered. To the extent AI might be used otherwise, it's not covered. So yeah, that'd be something you might want to add. Can we share? Yeah, Sierra, I don't know if you see Brady's comment about sharing the recording with institutions. That'd probably be very helpful. Maybe we can talk about how we distribute it afterwards.
Yep, no problem.
Okay. And let me see if anything else to bring up on here that I want to talk about. No, I think I'll leave it at that. I'll let you guys go unless there's one last question. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out on this. What is it, March 4th? I hope you guys see the first signs